One of these fairy tale realities is the human story. So this goes into the whole like how we define ourselves, how we define our reality. When you're trying to take over the whole world, you have to create definitions that are universal, this whole universal mentality. So we think the Illuminati and all this stuff started with whatever it is. But where I'm coming from on this channel, it's breaking down the very nature of how you speak, the language, the words you use. A lot of the distractions in the world right now are aliens and, the flat earth and all this other stuff that's out there. But we haven't really gotten into the space of understanding, and overstanding what it means to have your entire universe defined for you. A candy coating around a poison-centered core. And that poison-centered core is the manipulation and the dominance and the stealing of your time and your consciousness through that time, over time, by distracting you with all the fairy tales and the misinformation about how you perceive this reality as a whole. A lot of these definitions that are conditioned into our reality are given to us by the people who are infected with a deeper version of this disease. Like seeing it from the narcissistic, toxic family dynamic, you have labels and characters, people who play certain roles, they play certain parts of the overall, the macro algorithm. Each character is not necessarily aware of the character they're playing because they are consumed by the movie reel that is the manipulative psychological programming being divvied out by the centerpieces, the narcissists and the enablers and the flying monkeys and so on and so forth. They only sell the surface layer, the materialistic versions of this. So this is why so-called black people have a Black History Month. It's not our month. This was so-called white people putting a damper on how we perceive our past, present, and our future. So Black History Month holds up a macro castle of consciousness that is dedicated to keeping the machine of moral superiority running. If you don't play the game of maintaining the intellect of the moral superiority high ground of that system, then you will be cast out. And then this is the black sheep. So this goes back into the narcissistic family dynamic. So this moral superiority, you can see the mirror images between moral superiority coming from the institutions of racism and white supremacy through colonialism, capitalism, the whole colonial universe, including their intellect. Sciences in the university system are known to not be true science because a true science comes with a balance of the non-physical science or the spiritual sides, the spiritual balances of this reality as a whole. So intellectually, the entertainment business is calibrated at a 17-year-old consciousness. It's not even fully developed. When the society soaks people for their natural essence, that's when they can make a profit off of selling the synthetic versions of those natural connections. This is why the family dynamic goes hand in hand with the macro control grid. So the narcissistic consciousness needs a constant supply, which is the reproduction program through the family to maintain these systems to keep going. So this is why the broken family dynamic is so crucial to the overall control, because the broken family provides a good space for people to accept the human program. We're all one, everything's the same. Whatever they tell you in the fairy tale is true because you don't have anything in the first place. So that's why they have so many space shows and Big Bang shows and monkey evolution shows and their history, their stories, their entertainment. There's no real definitions. There's no strong definitions of the masculine or the feminine, the mother or the father. There's generations upon generations of people who are babysitters, who are basically just maintaining a space of survival, primitive survival race. This is how you can shrink down the consciousness of higher dimensional beings to an animal consciousness. It's on purpose is the whole point. It's on purpose. And the moral superiority system, largely because of their genetic deficiencies, want to make your natural spaces seem unnatural. and to make the synthetic realities that are profitable for that system seem more natural than your natural spaces. So your ancestors had to be demonized, and the future generations need to be mixed, and everything needs to be, there's no masculine, there's no feminine, everybody's the same, everything's just one. When you don't have any definitions of who and what you are, you're open to be mind controlled by whoever claims to have the moral superiority or the intellectual superiority, high ground over you. These are narcissistic supplies. So the narcissistic supply of the moral superiority world exists in the American dream, with the midlife crisis, buying the car, even the family. The reason why the individual needs to be in a consistent space of lacking in codependency and broken nature in a toxic space is because that maintains the toxic space of the macro world. And if you have a toxic macro world and you already maintain the moral superiority high ground, then you can claim to and actually provide services for the toxic nature. All of the information that's focused on the external evolution of society, technology, so on and so forth, all of that's an illusion to distract you from the actual intelligence of the indigenous people. Like I was saying in the previous video, the institution of education, the education system, that was a spiritual warfare attack on the masses of people around the world. What is true to yourself? And like I said, what is true to yourself is the hardest thing to see when you haven't had any reference points of change. Your only reference points of truth are in reaction to lies. So there is no real truth out there. There's only half-truth, the half-truth that is unveiling the lies. That plastic, metal, and glass being seen as some kind of the identity of that plastic, metal, and glass, that's what people are proud of. People are proud of the identity of the plastic, metal, and glass. And if you're not a part of that plastic, metal, and glass consciousness, you are a threat to that which one of the only things which they are proud of. So in reaction to the threat, they have to label you with their authority that came from the plastic, metal, and glass consciousness. That's the way plastic, metal, and glass people respond in situations, because that's how so-called white people have been doing it for years. In this situation, white people are the evolved technology of humanity. And if you do not play the plastic, metal, and glass so-called white people consciousness truther game, then you are divisive, which exactly makes you the aggressor and they're the victim. So this sucks you right back into the victim aggressor consciousness story interaction again, and you don't even have to deal with the information anymore. So this is the thing. So-called white people, it's particularly, I use as an example of, obviously, as a reference point, as an identity. It's the same as all the other ones are identities, is you get something back from it with that identity, just as other people don't get anything back. They get something taken away with the other identity that was given to them by the people who get something back from the created identity. The authority of consciousness comes from the authority of those identities. So the authority of truth comes from, first, the authority of the identity. So automatically, for people who haven't gone into the depths of the synthetic consciousness that comes as this new world consciousness, they're not going to see any of the information that you have been sharing if they're automatically in that defense mode of having to defend the synthetic illusion. Politics, education, and religion. These are the pillars of the so-called white intellect that adds up to so-called white people not being able to go to the depths of truth. They have to sit in this shallow version of consciousness. Just imagine it like a pool. And on this top layer, this pool, like, or an ocean, right? And there's this beautiful ocean of information, of truth, reality. But on this top of this ocean, you have this scum, like this shit, this sewage that has been caked on the top of the ocean for hundreds of years. And what's happening is that people have been skimming across the top of that scum, completely separated from the ocean below, thinking that the scum is the ocean. So if they fix the scum, they will then fix our relationship to the ocean. But they don't even know the relationship to the ocean, because they are also tying in the definitions of the original ocean people to their scummy ass perspectives and all that other garbage that gets put out there to have people react. So what people are doing is planting their roots, planting their seeds on that top layer of scum that has a bunch of trash and all that other shit. And the roots are going only into the depths of that scum, which is a reactionary truth. And once you start bringing the truth of the ocean to the surface, which is the baseline of that scummy ass, it's at the bottom of that scum oil slick, that shit slick that's sitting on top of the ocean. So-called white people are now ashamed, guilty of that. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to get rid of some of that guilt by claiming to share truth. And what do they do when they get in there? Well, first of all, they steal a whole bunch of other people's perspectives and realities, or breakdowns of reality, put their name on it, and then they tell a backwards and half-assed story at best version of what you already broke down. And the reason why they have to tell that backwards or half-assed story of what you already broke down is because only the backwards and half-assed story of what you already broke down is going to protect their creature comforts of their universe of authority, politics, religion, science. So truther communities will talk about the surface layer scum of the political scene. They'll talk about the surface layer scum of the religious scene. They'll talk about the surface layer scum of the science community, but they will never get to the depths of any of those communities because it threatens their own internal work, which they haven't done for the most part. Largely, the majority of people out there have not done that inner work, and you can see it. It exists in the way they approach what they call truth. So, since the hardest thing to do is to change yourself, what happens is that people are resorting to the idea of changing the world. This is that whole new world idea that channelers and aliens, aliens are going to save the day, just meditate and all this other stuff will fix the world. That is the defense mechanism. That's the distraction from the actual work that needs to be done. There is inner work that exists in the outer. There is macro work that exists in the micro, just as there is micro work that exists in the macro. Those storylines will never be addressed when you have people, the so-called authorities of information, the authorities of truth, focusing all of the attention on their own authority of intellect. Your truth is not a real truth, because the only truth that matters is the truth that comes out of a white person's mouth.
We are creating a mass-scale transformation of humanity into a fully empowered, conscious, and cooperative species. These are the thoughts in my brain. So when I come to work and I encounter a difficult situation, I'm immediately triggered back to, well, wait a second, no, we are doing great things and we are constantly winning and succeeding. And I don't let that negative self-talk come back into the process.
The New Age program is going to create a situation where they provide all of your spiritual answers to a psychological and physical problem. Whereas before, the system provided all of your psychological answers for your physical problems. So it was the evolution of consciousness dictated or sponsored by the Western colonial system. And as the old system sold you war and protection through war in a search for freedom, through democracy and capitalism and the Western idealism, now that has crashed and burned and seen for what it is, the American dream and all that bullshit, now that same system of people who created all this, these ideas where people worship them for being the best people ever and providing services for them, now that they're seen for what they are and the systems aren't working anymore, they have to evolve their systems now. And each time the consciousness of the people gets up to a certain space of unveiling how full of shit the system is, they sell another system, another evolution of systems. So an example of this was back in the civil rights time frame, when all that shit was popping off with the civil rights. They were assassinating our leaders. The doggy treat that was sold back then was going to the moon and giving people civil rights. So that was their idea, the system's idea of evolving consciousness. It's like the people are getting too conscious of what's going on. They're calling us on our bullshit. They're seeing how our old ways of racism, white supremacy are no longer, for one example, are no longer enough. White supremacy as a power move is no longer enough. We have to move into a system that can go full throttle with our power, but keep our motives underneath the surface. So they said, here's the civil rights. We're good people. We promise we'll do better for you. We've already built your streets and your roads and your national state parks. So they always tell you the positive, but they will never tell you the negative. And the negative is the 90th percentile of what this system is up to. But since people are only intelligent enough by the conformed system to only experience a 1% of reality, let's say it's 99 to 1%. Since people are only consciously engaged in the 1% of their consciousness in this reality, then they think the max out of that 1%, which is like the American dream at best, or the physical reality, this illusion. The illusion, they think the illusion, so-called benefits within the illusion are the best thing in the world. And they do that by saying, like, we are the first world, we are the best world, because the rest of the countries in the rest of the world are third worlds. But they will never tell you that the rest of the countries in the rest of the world are third world countries, because the first world countries soak them from their resources and bomb them to shit and turn them into third world countries. So this is how the story has been constantly played. And as long as they destroy, so just in that situation, as long as they destroy something, then they have something to fix. So this is the same thing with like a Donald Trump or all the presidencies. They sell you a shitty president, and then they get everybody riled up about being angry, and then they sell you your first black president or somebody, so-called positive. After old school Bush, it was Clinton. And then they came with Baby Bush, who was just a bigger piece of shit. And then after that, your first black president. And then after, your first black president, you had your Donald Trump. So it's like they always provide the villain and they always provide the superhero. So you can always be sitting around watching the movie as if it's the only thing that can happen in this reality. It's not as simple as, oh, it's the Jews or it's the money system. See, everybody who says that stuff, they say those things because they are sharing with you where they are at on their journey. Anytime we talk about the system of racism, white supremacy, and systematic institutionalized racism, and then you say somebody comes on to you into that discussion and says, oh, it's just the Jews. Well, wait, we're not looking for blame. We're talking about an actual system that not only did exist, but exists today. What good is it to say that, oh, it's the Jews, when we're talking about systems today? Is saying that going to do anything? No. So why is that always said all the time? Well, it's because it's a system existing inside the people trying to distract you from your own power, your own recognition of these systems so you can remove these systems. If you focus your attention like they do when they give you these bad presidents or even the good presidents, it's the same thing. When you focus your attention on them or on it, what you're not doing is focusing your attention on your maximum potential. That's the whole point with all these systems. So they get all these gurus on here after they fucked everything up. They say, oh yeah, spirituality's fucked up. It's been fucked up. Your religion's fucked it all up. Science fucked it all up. Like everything's all jacked up. And now we have to provide you guys with the answers. It's no coincidence that they had David Icke on London Real before they had Sadhguru. Because David Icke has more of a following, a cult following with the New Age community than Sadhguru does. Sadhguru is more, people try to stray away from gurus, so they got to suck you in with the so-called realistic information that gets promoted with David Icke. Because what's real to people who are caught up in that Western world is like politics. If you tie politics into aliens, people are on that shit like white on rice. They love that shit. It's real for them. That's what the system has designed to be real. Politics married with extraterrestrials and underground secret government shit, you sold them. That is the language of the new age mentality. So how do they do that? They get their main talking heads to how do they tie that positive momentum into the government? Well, they take the new age talking heads, the speakers who talk about that information, they co-opt them, and then they repackage them up into their own YouTube channel or their own perspectives, and then they sell it back out to the masses. And then eventually all these different stories that have been told half-assed up into a certain point, they reach this leveling out of awareness that is however many hundreds of degrees of separation from your maximum potential. Everything is not meant to be on this whole like we are one, we are all this, we are all that. That is all a romanticizing of your consciousness to maintain control over this reality as a whole through manipulating your consciousness. So they get these talking heads, a part of the new age community, to evolve the old ways into a new system. The same way they got all the conscious teachers back in the civil rights time frame to evolve the talking points of racism, white supremacy into the idea of civil rights and bettering the government's involvement with the people. You see how all this stuff is designed to channel your energy right into the system. So this is why this evolution of information or consciousness is such a slow process. The system has to make it look like the people are evolving their consciousness and awakening and becoming enlightened. They're doing it themselves. And not only that, but it has to have a governor on it. So this is how they make that shit real. But beyond that, it's not about awakening and enlightenment. That's all bullshit. It's all one-sided story, because that whole new age agenda being about the awakening and enlightenment and all that bullshit is totally devoid of the darkness, the whole other balances of this reality. So this is what I say. The new age doesn't know shit about the old age. It has to demonize the old age the same way the new world has to demonize the indigenous people. So the new age is doing the same thing that the new world did to the indigenous people. They're just doing it into to their spiritual interpretations of reality. Underhandedly, the new age is saying that the ancestral interpretations of the spirit and beyond, they're all full of shit. It's all bullshit. It's really about how we can interpret this reality today, because they still believe in that evolutionary bullshit. And a lot of people are also thinking that technology is tied up into this consciousness evolution too, because they think aliens and extraterrestrials are an expression of this higher intelligence or evolved intelligence. So this is how the old timeline or the old, how you interpret the cosmology of this reality, how you interpret the origins of this universe, this reality. This is how this affects you and mind controls you in the future, because you have no beginning, you have no understandings or overstandings of your beginning. It's just this random thing that happened, Big Bang out of nowhere, that created, the planet and possibly other alien activities, because it's such a vast universe. There can't possibly be only us out here. So they say, oh yeah, well the aliens are out there and they have a higher intelligence. That's why they stay away from us, because they're smart. You see how they just imagine all this shit up to make it sound useful? So it's making it sound useful, but also making it sound like it's the only thing that's out there. It's the only thing, because evolution deemed so. Evolution led up to the New Age community. Evolution led up to London Real getting its power and influence over the world. So it's valid like you should listen to London Real because they have an evolved consciousness like Sadhguru on their channel. So this is why people like London Real get people like David Icke and Sadhguru, because As long as they have their name attached to whatever else they're talking about, it validates all their other stuff. Because they'll just take the whole channel, they'll take the whole London Real InfoWars just because they trust Sadhguru. So they'll see a thumbnail of Sadhguru on London Real and automatically trust London Real. That's how cheap a lot of people are. Childish. And I'm kind of downplaying that, but that's the majority of people. Social media brains. That's what it is right now. It's like, just look at the thumbnail, just look at the title, just look at don't even understand or even understand or even get close to understanding what's going on. Just sound like you can talk about the title of the information enough to make it like a Twitter feed. So all this spiritual work that needs to be done that was done by our ancestors in sharing the process, because that's what it's really about. The spiritual warfare, or the spiritual experience, our expression of in that whole thing, it's not about a destination. It's about how you live your reality, like in every moment of thought and so on and so forth. So it's about lifetimes. It's not about a statement. It's not about a divine purpose, finding the answer for the divine purpose of the universe. It's not about that. In fact, if you come up with that, that'll be totally counterproductive to the actual shit that's going on. That's why these people are out there, because they want to give you the counterbalance that is looking like, or the counter action that looks like the actual action, but it's counter to your actual process or growth. This is how they prep you. They try it out on YouTube, and then once it's done on YouTube, then they kick it over to gear in the television, and they get more people, because that's what it's really about. You test it out on the smaller groups, and then you get into the bigger groups, and when you know it's effective. The same way they do with the military. All the vaccines and all the societal control measures that they put on people, they first test them out in the military. Proof of this is the microchip that you have in your debit card right now was first tested out on the military soldiers with their ID cards. And they got all the kinks out of it. They called it the cat card back then. They used it. And back then, it wasn't just for banking information. It was for all of your information, medical records, access codes, like or access points, whatever it was everything was on there. So the point being is, like I said, this stuff is designed to have effects on you that are, way down the line. But since people are so sold into this idea of this commercial version of spirituality and consciousness, they'll just buy this shit and they'll not question it at all. This is the whole thing about the New Age community. They are about you. They're about you. As long as the system is about you, then the system doesn't have to be accountable for itself. Manifesting happiness. So as long as you manifest happiness in a shitty, chaotic world, then the causers, the people who cause this shitty, chaotic bullshit at the expense of the masses of people, they will never be, brought to justice. They will never be held accountable for anything. So those systems will just continue to grow and get more jacked up. So this is the intention of the New Age community, to just focus all your energy and your willpower, your fire, to kill that all out, to water it all down, and just turn your focus into a higher consciousness. All this fleeting, just empty ass bullshit. Express yourself, like be higher, be better, be more evolved. This is what the system is trying to do on a large scale, to spiritually evolve the human consciousness. First of all, what is spiritual evolution? What is consciousness? What is humanity? They don't want to answer any of that stuff. They just want to say that they're doing it. Like, we're doing it. We're evolving consciousness through spiritual, the consciousness of humanity through love and unity and all that other stuff. But they won't go into defining love. They won't go into defining humanity. They won't go into defining spiritual evolution. They will use all those words to just get you to believe and do something, but they won't actually go into. That's when you're dealing with snake oil salesmen. So this is what the whole system is. It tells you it saves the world. It fights terrorism. It provides, democracy and freedom and all this other stuff, but it really ain't doing shit. It never has. It's only been doing something for itself. And these are the mechanisms it does it. It plays the victim, it plays the aggressor, it plays a superhero. And at the end of the day, as long as they're telling you how to think, act, and feel, it doesn't matter what they say as long as they control how you think, act, and feel. The fine details, you have to get into the language of what's going on. You can't just throw this flowery shit out there, because if you throw that flowery shit out there, you'll realize that the criminals that you're looking for, the criminal consciousness that you're looking for, is inside what they are saying is good for you. It's hidden underneath there. It's hidden underneath this idea of betterment and providing and so on and so forth. What this all boils down to is the system wants you to be spiritual up to a certain point. And that point is spiritual up to the point of being zombified out of acknowledging the depths of how fucked up this system is. It wants you to be spiritual up to the point to where you don't do anything to address the actual systems that are running rampant through this new age, new world colonial program. And they will get any kind of spiritual teacher to convince you of that. So-called spiritual teacher to convince you of that. They will pick up anybody who tells you some kind of spiritual practice that will help you not deal with or even think about the situations at hand on a macro scale. That's the intention of the new age, to distract your micro and your macro from all of the macro and focus all of the intention on the micro. At the end of the day, all it is about finding happiness. And then we're a mixture of all of it, the good and the bad, and you just gotta find happiness. Like, that's some old cheap ass bullshit that would only be sold by people coming from like the OWN network. That's the whole laugh in your face bullshit. That's Oprah, the OWN network. They own your ass. They own your fucking soul.